Lakshmi, you're not audible to us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Hylobiz Live. We do this session once in a month to bring together industry leaders or practitioners to impart knowledge which will be beneficial for small businesses to conduct their businesses better. So this week we would be this month we are discussing about e-invoicing, which has been in news from April 1st because of a new rule which has come into place, and for the small businesses especially. So here we have the pioneers in fintech business with us from both the Vayana team as well as the Hylobiz to discuss on e-invoicing. Let me just introduce the team here. First, Amit. He's Senior VP Supply Chain Services, Vayana, which is one of the India's leading trade finance platform. Amit leads new product and market initiatives at Vayana. Amit has been in financial services space for the last 15 years, focusing on trade finance, corporate banking, and with an experience in HSBC as well. At Vayana, Amit has built and grown multiple product initiatives in supply chain financing, commercial cards, GST offering, and cash flow based lending for MSMEs. Going over to welcome Amit to the session. Anurag, and here we have Anurag, the product and the technology head of Hylobiz. He has been contributing to Hylobiz for the last from the time of its inception. He has been instrumental in building connected business platform, banking platform for SMEs and MSMEs to bridge their financial services needs. He's a passionate product manager who build fintech products with great customer experience. Then going over to Manish. He's a CA experienced in corporate strategy and sales. He's featured in LinkedIn ads and Josh Talks. So he's the famous man here who is all over the social media. Contributes at VP and supply chain services business, which include GST, e-way bills, and e-invoice. Welcome all to the session. I'm Lakshmi. I'm part of digital marketing team of Hylobiz, and which take this initiative into reality. So let's go. Let's start with the basics, Manish. I'll start with you with a very basic question on what is e-invoicing.
Okay. Thanks, Lakshmi. Lakshmi, if we go by the bookish definition, right? So I would say e-invoicing means an electronic invoice. But then if we ask what is an electronic invoice, then we can say that an electronic invoice is a digital document that is exchanged between a supplier and a buyer and is validated by the government portal, right? If I talk about e-invoicing in the Indian context, it is the proposed system where B2B invoices are digitally prepared in a format, and these are authenticated by invoice registration portal, also known as IRP. And the system ensures that that a common format is followed by all the businesses before reporting those invoices to the GST portal. So the process of e-invoice goes like this: a supplier of goods prepares a normal invoice, then this normal invoice is converted into a JSON file, which has all the mandatory information required for e-invoice generation. This JSON file is created by the supplier's accounting software or by its ERP, and then it is sent to a GST Suvidha provider, a GSP, which sends this JSON file to an IRP. As I said, it's an invoice registration portal, and this is done on a real-time basis. IRP then validates this JSON file and adds three most important things. First is a QR code. Second is a 64-digit alphanumeric code, which is called as IRN number, also known as invoice reference number. Then they add acknowledgement number and acknowledgement date for that particular transaction. This is then e-signed by the IRP itself and then sent back to the GSP again. And then the role of GSP is to send it back from IRP to the source accounting software or source application which is generating the invoice. So to summarize, e-invoice is your normal invoice, but in an electronic format, plus a QR code plus an IRN number plus digitally signed by NIC or IRP. So this is
So,
what we can call it as e-invoicing.
you mean to say that a GSP can, how many GSPs are there in India, and Vayana being one of them? The Can you just confirm how many GSPs are there in India?
There are more than 50 plus active GSPs today in India. Vayana being the premier GSP today, we are the most prominent GSP in terms of the API throughputs that we have given to the GST network. In fact, if I talk about e-invoicing, around 22% of the total e-invoices that are generated in India are through Vayana GSP.
So initially it was mandatory for large businesses, then for the mid-sized business, and now for small-sized businesses to do invoicing. So how do you see e-invoicing adding value to the business landscape?
Okay. So I would say e-invoicing initially started for greater than 500 crore turnover companies, and it started from 1st of October 2020. Then the threshold was reduced to 100 crores from 1st January 21. Then again the threshold was reduced to 50 crores from 1st April 2021, and now it has been reduced to 20 crores from 1st April 2022. Right. So and since you asked that, what are the benefits of e-invoicing for a business, I would say the first and the foremost benefit that we can kind of say is invoice resolves and plugs a major gap in the data reconciliation part. So today there are very less requirements of reconciliation because now you basically have a source of truth, which is your e-invoice. So now multiple reconciliation requirements are have been reduced, and since you have a source of truth, which is e-invoice, your reconciliation, your errors related to reconciliation, and even your hard work pertaining to such reconciliations has reduced. The second advantage, I would say, e-invoices created on one software can also be read by the second software. So now there is an interoperability which can be done, and it has also helped in reducing the data entry errors because of this entire interoperability. The third point, I would say, it's e-invoices actually given a kind of a real time tracking of invoices. These invoices, if they are prepared by a supplier today, the buyer can see it on a real time basis. Now they know the exact invoice amount, invoice date, uh, and everything related to an invoice is now on their fingertips. So the tracking of an invoice because of e-invoice is now possible.
So
And
fraud
last,
becomes less, right? Right.
right, right. And just to add one more point, I think now there is an automation of tax return filing also possible because of e-invoicing. So now once you generate an e-invoice, everything gets auto-populated from your e-way bill to your GSTR1. All these things are auto-populated. So kind of a backward integration is also now possible, and return filing has become easier as compared to what it was earlier.
Yeah, since you listed all the four different benefits, one point didn't was not clear to me: the interoperability part. That you mean to say that if I create an invoice in Vayana system or Hylobiz system, it can be read by another invoicing system. That is what you meant to say.
So an e-invoice is nothing but a JSON file or a machine readable file, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
it can be read by one application, it can also be read by the second application. So now this reading of invoices is now possible in multiple applications.
Now going over to Amit on another scenario. What are the thoughts on future of invoicing in India?
Yeah, thank you, Lakshmi. So, as Manish explained that, we have been progressively seeing an expansion of the compliance net within India with more and more taxpayers getting, uh, you know, uh, obligated for complying to e-invoicing. But I think over the course of the next few, years, we are going to see, the following developments as this compliance net widens. First of all, we'll see a broadening of the scope of multiple activities in terms of optimization. We'll start seeing optimization of the financial supply chain, and by that what I mean is corporates and their supply chain will start seeing some reduction in the operating costs because you are seeing more automation and digitization coming into the process of exchanging your fiscal documents, starting from a PO to an invoice to actually receiving the payments. Second, it will also lead to certain working capital optimization, and focus will actually start moving towards how small businesses can optimize their whole working capital cycle. There are of course multiple options that are emerging in this field, and I'll speak about that little later. Um, we also expect corporates to start automating their entire procurement process. So suppliers who are part of any corporate's procurement network will actually stand to gain by better adherence to e-invoicing. Um, what we are also seeing is that the government is, though right now focused on covering the B2B invoice space for e-invoicing, there is also view to start bringing in B2C transactions, from a better traceability standpoint within this compliance framework. For example, last year the government also mandated B2C transactions for corporates with more than 500 crores turnover to start having QR codes printed on those invoices. So eventually, what we are likely to see is integrating electronic, point of sale invoices or mobile invoices in some shape and form in the concept of electronic invoicing. And lastly, as Manish said, we are starting to see a harmonization of tax automation and business processes around tax reporting. Within India, e-invoices that get reported to IRPs also result into a automated population of the GST returns that need to be filed. So more and more simplification of the tax compliance process is expected to be taking shape. Beyond the processes, Lakshmi, what I also see is there's going to be a growing demand for value-added services because more and more automation will, require services around messaging, around payments, around reconciliation, etc., coming in. And I would say service providers like Vayana and Hylobiz, who are able to offer wider spectrum of these services as a single bouquet, are likely to offer the better proposition, and that's also going to lead to certain consolidation of within the space of service providers in the e-invoicing space. Lastly, I think technology will continue to keep playing a role in shaping this landscape. We are going to see more and more, you can say, validation of data, by moving to a symmetric, clearance model for, e-invoicing. We are likely to start seeing some use cases of, blockchain, taking shape here, especially in longer supply chains where trust and traceability, will be critical. We are also seeing within India a shift towards cloud-based softwares, considering that cloud-based softwares provide a cost elasticity, agility, and a better change management both for the product provider as well as for the software user, and a better collaboration. So yes, clearly that shift has been taking shape since the last 2 3 years, and it's only going to accelerate further. Uh, Other activities such as robotic process automations, and machine learning, will definitely be getting applied. So in general, small businesses are going to benefit from all of these, technologies being leveraged. Um, with they being able to focus on value adding, activities within their business, can really focus on the mid to long term goals than on repetitive activities which otherwise consume their time, on a day-to-day basis. And that's also what, as a philosophy, both Vayana and Hylobiz have been, taking through its, product offerings to the SME ecosystem. Thank you.
Yeah. And since we are talking about the progress in India, which are the other countries who have already geared up in this with e-invoicing, and how is our comparison? How is our progress in compared with other countries?
Sure. So I think the global landscape is also seeing a lot of shift towards e-invoicing because more and more governments have been focusing on growing tax revenues by increasing the formal economy, curbing the evasion, and reducing VAT gaps. Um, if you see, the early adoption, started with countries like, Brazil and Mexico in Latin America,
Mhm,
and with a few
mhm,
countries in Asia and, Europe. But now we are seeing more and more countries, accelerating their roadmaps. So over the course of the next 5 to 7 years, we are expecting more countries in Asia, such as, Philippines and a few other countries, including China.
mhm,
While the Western Hemisphere side, we are expecting, US and some of the other European countries to accelerate this space. Of course, each country, has aligned themselves to a specific model of e-invoicing towards,
mhm,
the whole messaging protocol and its administration. India, in that sense, has made a wise choice of, selecting the PEPAL approach, which has been seen in, Europe. And with this approach, what we are likely to see is the cost of messaging or transmitting the invoice data is going
mhm.
to drastically, reduce. So I think over the course of next 5 to 7 years, I think we'll have more than 50 countries live on e-invoicing. We'll see more volumes of invoices actually getting reported to tax authorities. Globally, there are about 600 billion plus invoices, estimated. Probably just about 10% of those are actually getting covered.
Mhm.
But this volume is likely to quadruple or basically grow 4 times by 2030. And yeah, so there is a lot of shift happening towards that.
What was the method which you were saying that we have adopted, which is similar to European standards?
It's a protocol known as PEPAL.
Okay. Moving over to another question with Manish. With the new law in place for small businesses, what do you think that the major myths that people have regarding e-invoicing?
Thanks, Lakshmi, for bringing this up because I talk to many people day in day out, and there are multiple myths that are there surrounding e-invoicing. And if we talk about first and the foremost myth, I think people assume that e-invoicing is required for all transactions as of now, right?
Mhm,
While as of now it is not required for all transactions. As of now, e-invoicing is mandatory only for business to business or B2B transactions and export transactions, while B2C transactions are not covered as of now.
mhm,
But slowly and steadily, probably B2C transactions would also be included in the ambit of e-invoicing. But as of
mhm,
now, the biggest myth is it for all transactions? Then the answer is no. The probably the second myth that I have observed is that people assume that there are separate invoice formats that would be required for each and every business, right?
mhm,
Uh, as of now, there are separate formats for each and every industry, each and every business. But with e-invoicing coming in, I think a standard e-invoice schema has been issued by the government, and this schema is applicable for all kinds of business, whether you are into manufacturing, service, anything. But the schema remains the same, right? So while generating your invoice using this prescribed format, all you have to do is you have to just fill in uh, all the mandatory fields, as well as fill the optional fields if you wish to. And those fields and all these mandatory and optional fields uh, are the ones which you have only which are relevant to your line of business, right? You do not need to
mhm,
fill the those optional fields which are not relevant to your business. So this
mhm,
is again a very important myth that I would want to clear. Thirdly, I think people assume that invoicing is expensive, right? And
mhm,
people tell me that compliance is expensive. I always tell them try non-compliance. So many people believe that invoicing is very expensive to implement. That is definitely not the case. In fact, invoicing can reduce your cost of invoicing. For example, it can reduce your paperwork, it can reduce your data entry cycle,
mhm.
it can reduce human errors. So because of these reductions, I think it is not really expensive. It is in fact much more cheaper as compared to what it is today.
In fact, just to add to Manish, small businesses, would stand good by recognizing the value that is going to get unlocked, through various, improvisations. I talked about working capital optimization think of faster payments from your buyers, with all the time that gets saved, ensure because of the accuracy involved in e-invoicing, unlike paper-based invoices. And there are, of course, multiple other benefits that they will stand to gain in the long term.
Is there anything that they need to be mindful of while implementing the system? Is there some special things, special processes which they need to be mindful of?
I think this question is pointed towards me, right?
Yeah, Manish, yeah.
So as I said, they should be mindful of compliance. They should be compliant with the laws that are there in the country. If they are required to be invoicing, they should be invoice compliant. Secondly, I think there is a supply chain effect coming into picture, right? When all the parties, all the suppliers, all the vendors are slowly and steadily getting covered under e-invoicing, everybody would be following a specific format. Everybody would be kind of adding those same data fields on their invoices, right? So it is important that you also become part of that supply chain effect and become compliant. And I think they should also be mindful of selecting the right solution provider, whether they select the right accounting software or the right application service provider, or in fact the right GSP, because until unless you have these right solution providers, see, e-invoicing and all these e-way bill and these kind of transactional compliances, you have to generate a e-invoice at midnight as well, right? So you cannot just assume that I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it day after tomorrow. That's not possible. It has to be done on a real-time basis. So you should be mindful of selecting the right solution provider, which can kind of guarantee you 100% of time. So I think these are the few areas wherein SME or a user of e-invoicing should be mindful of. Thanks.
So this, when you say real time, is it like the businesses put in the invoice and they get a acknowledgement then and there, or is there a time lag between in the process?
Okay, so the law says that once your invoice is created within 24 hours, the invoice should be created, right? But normally what I am seeing today is as soon as the transaction is happening, as soon as the e-way bill is generated, the e-invoice is also generated at that point of time. It takes less than, I would say, if I talk about Vayana, it takes less than 200 to 300 milliseconds for an invoice to be generated. But if you talk about some other players, I think it is actually a real-time process. It has to be done on a real-time basis, because as soon as the transaction is happening, that invoice is necessary so that the truck which is standing at the factory gate can leave.
Okay. Now this is for you, Anurag. How does connected banking, connected ERP make it easier for businesses to function along with e-invoicing?
So, Lakshmi, I mean, very interesting, thing which Manish just explained from the small businesses myth point of view, that it is going to be very complex process. Number one, then they start thinking, okay, I need to have, X, Y, Z things to fall in place first of all before even getting onto the invoicing and all. So, for this question, I will break this into two. The first, I'll focus on from the e-invoicing point of view, what is required, and then I will come to the connected banking point of view. So today, you see, in a very layman language, if there is a business owner today sitting and who are listening to this can relate to this problem, as a single man army, there are customers to be managed, there are vendors to be managed, and there is complete sales to be managed. And in this entire process, okay, there is someone creating an invoice and then going to the buyers. And when it is going to the buyers, there is a due date there which needs to be met. There is a credit which by default is there in the business, and you cannot, go away from that. So when entire thing is happening, there's only one guy who has to make sure, these things are going, in a very streamlined process, which is this business owner. Yeah. And while everything is happening, it is practically impossible for him, to keep track of it in real-time manner, which eventually leads to delays at different stages. And, it breaks the entire process of, this standard streamlining, which we generally think, in any business, it should be. The business process never gets executed that way. So similarly for invoice, if also you see, today when you create an invoice, which Manish was explaining, there are chances of, human errors. You are entering certain codes of the product may not necessarily be correct. And now when the moment it is e-invoice and you're punching everything, the way we have built this Hylobiz proposition also, this entire product in association with Vayana, this takes care of all your checks and balances then and there. So from the data entry point of view, you are sorted. Once you have created and sent the invoices basis on the due date and the transaction dates, Hylobiz gives this accessibility to the business owner now to keep track of, what is happening to my invoices, what is happening to my payments, how my buyer is behaving, how my vendor is acting up. So entire thing is there. And while this entire process for this, any tool that they are using today, we are not changing, we are not replacing anything, we just pick this information from there. So again, coming back to from the invoice point of view, so today if any of these business owners are using any system, let's say if they are on Tele, if they are on Soho, let them create this data. We pull this data on Hylobiz and we give them the option to generate invoice. We give them the option to send these payments, reminders, messages to their buyers on timely basis. There are additional methods to collect payments we enable for them. And let's say if they are not using any such standard system and there is a homegrown platform which has the capability, to even integrate, then there are APIs that Manish mentioned about. So those APIs are available for these businesses to connect and do business and generate invoice, e-bill, etc., etc. Now, if let's say there is no such capability, no homegrown platform, very rudimentary way of doing the business, wherein someone is creating invoices on Excel and then creating into converting into PDF and sending to the buyer, those details they can upload through a file on our platform, and we help them giving the option of generating a invoice or invoice, either thing. And the entire process of following up with the buyer, everything is sorted. And the fourth is on our platform also, if they want, these businesses have the option to generating invoice. So on the accounting side of things, if you see, this is how we are streamlining. And I talked about the payouts or the option to collect payments, sending the reminders, etc. The other problem, which is very important for these business owners which they face on day in day out basis, is the reconciliation issue. Now, payment has come in, but then the problem is how to match this payment against what invoice, right? So Hylobiz also takes care of all those pieces, right? Uh, uh, in a way that when the payments are coming through Hylobiz hub, then automatically those information is getting pushed back to the respective platforms. There is a comment coming from Mr. Rohit. He is asking about the data privacy. So these are all bank grade platforms that we are building. So from the data privacy point of view, this data is only accessible to the business owner. This data is yours. Your buyer information is yours. It's not shared with anyone else on the system. And if you see also, Manish also highlighted, Amit also highlighted about the JSON structure. So what also it does eventually is, it helps you building your own business profile in a way that tomorrow, if you need a working capital loan, tomorrow you need any sort of a business loan which can push your business to the next level, where you need in the business, in the trading business, the rule is very simple. The quicker you are able to move your inventory, the faster you are able to move that, the better for you to stay in the game, and the better it is for you to make money out of it, your profits, right? So for those things, this entire process helps building that profile, which soon we are going to launch on the platform also. This helps you building this profile in a way that these financiers can also access this information on your consent, and can help you giving you all this related information, or say help you giving those relevant products on the working capital and business loan requirement. Now coming to the second part, which is the connected banking piece. So we talked about the reconciliation where payment happened and we updated the status and all. The other thing that we are doing with our banking partners, we have started this with Axis Bank and Yes Bank. So all these customers of Axis and Yes today can come on to Hylobiz, can connect their bank account on the platform, and all the payouts which needs to be done to the vendors, or the reimbursement or the salary that needs to be paid, this account they can access right from the application, can upload the file, can make the payouts, and we take care of the reconciliation also on the payout side. So there is no need to jump from one system to another system and to another system, and then download all the files and then sit down and spend your time in doing the reconciliation, and where also chances of errors are there. So we have taken care of all these pieces, and we are helping these businesses to now come and utilize this application as one single interface, where both connected accounting and connected banking can work hand in hand together. Yeah.
Now, moving to Amit with regards to what are the implications of e-invoicing in lending ecosystem? Will it help lenders as well as the credit-seeking MSMEs?
Yeah, I think this has been a question or issue, much talked about and watched, especially in the advent of GST over the last
Mhm.
3 to 4 years in India. To give some backdrop, to this issue, what we have been seeing over the multiple decades within the banking and lending industry in India is that when it comes to offering credit facilities to small businesses, banks would generally be constrained only looking at SMEs which have certain track record in terms of
Mhm.
business vintage and have a decent balance sheet that has got built with certain security or collateral that they can offer to the bank. um, Also, if you see the overall process or time it takes, from the bank to actually approve that credit facility, generally could be taking a few months. Starting from a due diligence process, which is completely paper based,
Mhm.
uh, data that is getting submitted, to the bank for the credit diligence, happening in a broken manner, in a physical manner, which elongates the overall turnaround time. And in the current fast paced environment that SMEs have to grapple with, especially with regards to uncertain demand forecasts, what we have seen over the last 2 years, especially with COVID,
Mhm.
availability of capital on tap is very critical, for SMEs. Where now, while these issues have been plaguing SMEs for quite some time, to be also fair to the banks and the NBFCs as lenders, the challenge
Mhm.
has been the quality and the accessibility of data, of business data, based on which lenders can actually conclude the due diligence and be satisfied with the SME's health before they can approve that loan and get them on board. And I think in that sense, there is now a huge reform which is taking shape, starting with the launch of GST, 4.5 years back, and now with e-bill and e-invoicing. What's really happening is a substantial amount of transactional or trade data is being made available on statutory systems, which can be accessed by lenders on the basis of a consent, an electronic consent that the business owner who is approaching the lender for a borrowing facility. So, on the basis of their consent, that data can get aggregated and it can be digitally, used for building a profile to complete the credit diligence of that small business. Um, Also, the recency of that data also plays a important role. When you look at the conventional mechanisms of studying businesses on the basis of audited financials, well, most small businesses may not even have today, their FY21 financials audited, for a variety of reasons. And banks are required to take a call on financials which are very dated. And in the case of SMEs, that situation may significantly change within a matter of a few months. So, as against that, GST, e-invoicing, etc., is making that uh, providing that visibility of the business health quickly, digitally, and up to date, right? Because you would have access, the lenders would have access to the data as recent as maybe the last month.
Mhm.
So that is one thing. Now, how is this reforming the lender's approach to SMEs, vis-a-vis their conventional credit products that they used to offer? I think first of all, there is a substantial growth which is already being seen for trade finance as a mode of working capital financing for SMEs, as against overdraft and cash credit facilities, and also that trade finance being made available to them on an unsecured basis. So I think that's one important win for the whole SME ecosystem. The second point here is that even today, while trade financing programs, which are orchestrated by large corporates for their distributors or suppliers, have been in place for a number of years. Even today, they still cover a fraction of the overall supply chain, and I think in that, Vayana is playing a key role in taking trade finance or supply chain finance deeper within the supply chain ecosystem. We are focusing on the long tail, the small suppliers or the small dealer distributors, and even subsequent tiers going right up to retailer or the last mile, by bringing in cash flow based financing approach, based on our strong experience both in the area of digitally orchestrating supply chain financing as well as enabling GST compliance. What I also see is newer forms of trade financing products itself, taking shape. We are seeing on-demand supply chain financing. For example, when you look at the Threads platforms, you are seeing SMEs, literally taking financing on tap by only offering certain specific invoices and not the entire trade flow that they may have with a particular buyer. We are seeing products like dynamic discounting and revenue-based financing, also coming in, and I think these are very useful tools, for SMEs. Lastly, since I spoke of how GST data or e-invoicing data is going to accelerate, the whole, inclusion, from a lending standpoint for the SME ecosystem, I would just like to add that there are certain transformational efforts which are taking shape within India, led by think tanks like iSport. So one point that I spoke of is the time it takes to turn around the credit decision through physical submission of information. That's likely to change over the course of the next few quarters or years with an initiative called Open Credit Enablement Network, or OCEN, wherein on the basis of a digital consent, a small business will be able to provide authority to a lender to access their bank statement data, to access their GST data, and such other important elements, which will allow the lenders to, digitally turn around with a quick decision on the lending request. And I think these are going to be, key transformations that SMEs should be looking forward to, and at the same time, adopting, the whole compliance of e-invoicing, with open hands, so as to gear themselves for the next phase of growth. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's go to Anurag with another question on e-invoicing and Hylobiz in context. How does Hylobiz ease out the issues the SMEs are facing, Anurag? And how well is Hylobiz prepared to help businesses with e-invoicing?
Good question, Lakshmi, which I actually tried to cover in the previous one also. So, the way we have built this entire proposition on Hylobiz is enabling these businesses to generate or avail this facility in more than one way. If, let's say, they are using certain pre-integrated ERPs or accounting platforms that Hylobiz is connected today, then Hylobiz pulls entire information and gives the option to these businesses to generate an invoice against it. If, let's say, they do not have any of such platforms that they're using is integrated with Hylobiz, then through the file-based or API-based mechanism, they can generate a invoice by uploading this information. All the relevant validations which are important, to ensure that when they're creating an invoice must be a successful one, then those are already in place, and the platform, the way we have built is it's all going to guide them on a step-by-step process and very simple process like it, tick and go. in less than a minute, anyone can upload, can create this invoice from our platform. And uptime wise also is, it's like available 24/7, as Manish highlighted, and that is one of the reasons why Hylobiz has given this, importance of integrating with GSP like Vayana in this case, for a very simple reason, that we don't want to let down our customers, especially when they have to create this invoice 24/7 at any given point of time, as Manish highlighted. So Hylobiz is geared up in terms of is providing this entire option to these to our users, at any given point of time, round the clock, various ways to generate the e-invoice. In terms of what is our next strategy, what is that we are doing, uh, all the other peripheral services around e-invoices is what Hylobiz is now going to bring to our users. And
Mm-hmm.
while we are doing so, there is a dedicated technical support and account management also that we have enabled,
Mm-hmm.
purely from the perspective that it also requires quite a significant handholding when our teams go and talk to the users. So what we have ensured is, anyone trying to understand or trying to, figuring out, what is the other way, that they can generate the invoice or any other service, so to say, as I was explaining, there are a bunch of other important and critical products that we have rolled out, and people are appreciating it. So our team is geared up in terms of, sitting down with them, understanding and making those customizations also wherever it makes relevant. And this entire thing we are doing from one single purpose, that we want our users to come and should be able to utilize these services, as quick as possible and in best of the experiences that they can get on the system. There is complete traceability, just not from the invoice point of view, but from the collections which is coming against these invoices. There is a complete audit trail, there is complete transparency, there is complete traceability available. Field collections also are available for these businesses, rather than identifying some other application. These are those things that we have enabled on the platform for them, that they can associate. So in nutshell, you can say it's a end-to-end invoice management engine that we have provided, by integrating and, or say, by bringing all these accounting platforms together. So whatever they are doing keeps doing. There is nothing that gets changes. It's Hylobiz that automatically takes care of, this pulling of the information, creating these details, and pushing back to their respective systems. So this is what, Lakshmi, we are doing at Hylobiz at the moment, and we have a very, very powerful roadmap for next 3 to 6 months. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of interesting products and features we are going to bring to our users. Invoice is just a start. Payments we have sorted, connected banking we have brought in for our users. Similarly, there are going to be additional ways to make transactions paid out, for all the other things that they do in the business in day in day out, and a lot of powerful dashboards also the business owners will get now from our application. So the roadmap for this year is very powerful, and I believe with this coming in, our users will be able to do all the things today that they are struggling to do. Their complete digital application is, or transformation is, what they will be able to do through Hylobiz, without worrying about how they are going to maintain, what is the cost of for development. Technical
Mm-hmm.
know-how is not at all required. Hylobiz is going to do all that heavy lifting for them.
Sure. To conclude, and our last question, to conclude on all of it, how do this is for Manish? How do businesses have to become e-invoice ready or and invoice compliant, basically, to conclude all of it together?
Okay. So I think, Lakshmi, basically they need to understand e-invoicing law as well as e-invoicing logic. So unless they
Mm-hmm.
understand the law and the logic behind e-invoicing, they will
Mm-hmm.
never be able to become truly e-invoice compliant. So I think the first point is to understand law as well as the logic behind that law. So just to give you an example, as I said, there are 24 hours that within 24 hours you have to generate an e-invoice, right? So they have to
Mm-hmm.
understand why it is T+1, or the data gets purged from e-invoicing portal after 3 days. So why it is getting purged within T+3 days. So these laws as well as logics have to be understood by the businesses. Only then I think they would be able to become e-invoice compliant. Secondly, I think they need to understand what are their current processes and if there is any change or shift required in their current processes. So once that is determined, then they can finally zero down to a good e-invoicing solution.
True.
Again, when I say an e-invoicing solution, they also need to determine whether it is going to be a complete change in their invoicing application, or it is going to be a plug and play ASP like Hylobiz, wherein you do not need to change your ERP or accounting software and just plug and play, and your data gets forwarded to Hylobiz, and Hylobiz then does the heavy lifting. Or probably if they have a very large ERP which is already compliant, they need to select the right GSP for it. So they will have to understand their requirement. They will have to understand where they are going, what is their future, and how they want to do it. Only then they will be able to finally determine what is the right e-solution, e-way invoice solution provider for them. Or probably they do not need any invoice solution. They can just directly go to the IRP portal and generate it. So it is completely on the business, how they want to automate it, whether they want to save time or not. All these things are actually dependent on the business. And once they understand all these things, only then I think they would be truly be able to become invoice compliant.
We have certain questions from Rohit. Does spend management platforms cooperate with invoicing? I suppose who want to take up this question? Did you get the question? Does spend management platforms cooperate with e-invoicing? Is what the question is. Any one of you want to take up this question?
Yeah, I could take that. So I think when any enterprise is using a spend management platform, one of the key inputs to the processes on the spend management platform would be accurately, updating or uploading, the transactions, that need to be expensed out, using whatever mechanism, whether it's a credit line or own liquidity, etc. And one of the points that I made, at least in the case of corporates, what I have seen happening is they are taking the benefit of e-invoicing in the capacity of a buyer to see that their supplier e-invoices get automatically populated within their purchase modules or purchase ledgers of the ERP, and the same should also apply in the context of spend management platforms. Now that ensures that the physical activity which happens for updating those transactions on an ERP or on a spend management platform is avoided. You are ensuring more accurate inputs, not just accurate, but I would say these are invoices which have been fraud proof, right? You are not updating invoices without fraud checks, which may happen in the case of a paper trail. And that of course can then beautifully roll up into various analytics that a business can track in terms of their spend management, and they can accordingly work on their goals with regards to their working capital optimization or DPO extension, etc. I mean, there are a number of possibilities from this, but yeah, to answer that question, spend management platforms can integrate to e-invoice data.
Sure. Here's another question from the same person, Rohit. Is it GDPR compliant?
Should I take this?
Yeah, sure.
No, so basically, e-invoicing is actually pertaining to India. There are multiple compliance laws that are there, and all these things have been taken care of. Just to give you a sense of how the I think majorly wants to ask about the data privacy, right? I think data privacy question has been already answered by Anurag, but just to take this one step forward, see, when the data is being transferred from your application to the IRP portal, right? So you're sending this data through a GSP, and how the mechanics of GSP are that they have to ensure that the data that is being transferred from one place to another is completely encrypted. Nobody can see it. The final authority, which is the IRP portal, decrypts that data, does all the things that are required from QR code generation to an IRN generation. Again, signs it back and then sends it back to the GSP, and then GSP sends it to an application like Hylobiz. So all these things are completely encrypted. There's nothing that anybody in between can see. And since we are talking about Indian e-invoicing, GSTN has taken all the norms possible for keeping this data completely secure.
Sure. We are now open to public for any other more questions. Thanks, Rohit, for all those intriguing questions which you asked in the system. You can just wait for a minute for anybody else to ask any more questions. No, there are no more for today. Anyways, we are open on all our social media for questions. So hit us on any of the channels for any more clarifications. Thanks a lot, everyone, for being here, being part of this live. We hope to provide a better solution for all our customers. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.